We are back in the studio and we're going to take the raw files and put them through several processes in order to get our HDR panoramic. We are going to use Capture One to process the TIFF files. We're going to use Photomatix to compile them into 32-bit radiance HDR files. We are not going to tone map them at this time because first we're going to assemble them as a 32-bit panoramic made of 5 angles, and each of those 5 angles will be made up of 5 exposures. Then we will go back to Photomatix for tone mapping because I prefer it over using the PT GUI's built-in tone mapping files and or Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Capture One here, and you'll see I have 25 files, 5 exposures of each. I've gone in and done subtle changes to white balance and coloring. In Capture One there's all kinds of tools. I will not go over them today. I'm going to assume you can do the same thing with Lightroom if you're a Lightroom user. If you have questions, please send them to me, post on my wall. The only thing I did want to change a little bit different is they have a color editor with an advanced tool in the software, and you can actually select colors like this green here, and you can sweep it around to be a bit more warm or a bit more blue. I'm going to blue it up a bit, lighten it up a bit, and then I'm going to hit copy all the setting adjustments that I have on my file. I'm going to hit Command A to select everything, hold Shift, and the down arrow will apply all these settings to all of the files. So I'm going to now go to this tool here, just as a quick run through, processing a TIFF at 16-bit. I'm going to embed my Phase 1 color profile because it's the most robust color that I have at 100% magnification, and I'm going to hit Process up here. I'm going to start the queue, and because I've already processed these files, I'm actually going to stop it again and delete all these and quickly go over to the folder where I've prepped these files for work. And then I'm going to go to this folder here on the desktop where the output file original TIFFs have all been processed. So these are all the 25 files we were looking for, and what I want to do is compile these into HDR radiance files using Photomatix Pro. I'm going to batch my bracketed photos using this tab here. I'm going to select 5 images at a time. Under the Merge into 32-bit HDR files, which is what I want to do, I'm going to check the settings. If there's any moving cars or flying birds or moving trees, we actually want to remove any ghosting, and since we're batching this, it's going to have to do it automatically. If there's any noise in the shadow areas for the darker exposures, we can reduce those, and I'm going to do that. And it will select 5 files at a time. It will align the images by matching the features and perspective corrections. While I did have everything on a tripod, we were on tall boom in the air and there was some swaying, so we want to make sure this feature especially is selected. So we're going to select the source folder, which is the original TIFFs folder, and then we're going to choose a customized location and go to the HDR compilations folder, which is right above it. And we're ready to go. We're going to click Run the Batch, and it will take some time to process these images. So some time has passed. The images have finished processing, and it shows the finished results folder here, which is the HDR compilations folder. I can go ahead and close and quit Photomatix for now, just to have it out of the way. I'm going to look at these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 files, and I'm going to want to now stitch them as a panoramic radiance file. So I'm going to drag this down to PT GUI Pro, drop them there. PT GUI is a software meant to be used for stitching panoramics or staggered images where it doesn't have to be in a horizontal or vertical perfect line. You can have your camera at different angles, and when you throw it to PT GUI, it assembles it into a perfectly wide angled kind of shot. When you first drag the pictures into the file, the thumbnails will load in the top left, and before we click the Align Images button, we have to give the software some information about our images. Once we've compiled everything into a 32-bit radiance file, a lot of the metadata associated with the captures has been lost, so we have to manually enter this. In this case, I know my lens was a 45mm, and I know my digital back has a 1.3 crop factor to the best of my knowledge. If you don't know off the top of your head what you shot at, you can go back to Capture One, launch the software again, and once you get in there and you click on one of the raw files, the software is generous enough to give you the information. In this case here, I have ISO 200 was what I shot at, 1/30th of a second, f5.6, 45mm, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and quit that. And if I also wanted to have the crop factor, I would look into my instruction manual or Google it. But once I filled those two in, I'm going to click the OK button. I'm going to go over here and click Align Images. Analyzes them, goes very quickly at doing this, and it will pop up a separate window called the Panorama Editor. We're going to then visually scan this, and I see no problems with it. You'll notice where I'm moving my mouse right now that there is some lines there where the images have lined up. That's a separation between the two vignettes of the two images, and we're going to try to correct that before we process this. And I should comment that what we're looking at right now is a 32-bit file, so this bright white blown out area, these dark shadows, looks disgusting, but that's not what's going to be there in the end. This is too much information for this computer to represent. It's a high dynamic image, and what we have to do is bring this down to a low dynamic range so that we can actually see all the colors and tones that we want to. So I'm going to go ahead and close the Panoramic Editor. It's just a preview. I'm going to skip the source images, skip the mask, skip the control points, go straight to exposure and HDR. I do want to enable HDR stitching. I don't really care about the tone map settings. If you did want to tone map this, it could generate a preview. You can tweak some things in here, but I find that the tools are more limiting than Photomatics. So I will just go ahead and stitch a basic 32-bit image and work with it in Photomatics. So down here, I'm going to optimize now the vignetting curve of each shot. And you'll notice this line has now generated a preview of what they think would be a proper correction for that image. I could generate a preview, but I'm just going to go ahead because I'm pretty confident with my work. I'm going to uncheck a tone map panorama. I'm going to ignore all this, it doesn't matter. I just want to create an HDR panoramic, and I'm going to send it to the batch stitcher. It's already going to suggest that I put it in the folder here, but I'm going to put it under Final Panoramic, and it's going to go ahead here and start thinking. Now the great thing about PT GUI is the batch stitcher is a separate software. I could go and do work on the next project and it will create all these lists. I can quit this software and the batch stitcher itself is going to keep running. So I'm going to put that up there and we can see it's moving fairly quickly. So we have our HDR file now compiled in a PT GUI into a panoramic. We're going to drag that down into Photomatics Pro. It's going to offer me a 158 megapixel estimate of this image and ask me if I want to do a lower resolution kind of JPEG preview. I'm like, no, I want the full Monty. I want all the resolution and all the file. And it's going to open up again as a highly contrasty 32-bit image, which has not yet been reduced to a low dynamic range image. So we're going to click tone mapping once it's opened up, and we have presto. A good start to this image. I find it a bit dull, but we're going to work on that. We could spend forever and a day going through all of our presets, but I'm going to teach you a few simple things about the software. Saturation in this software is quite stunning. You would think if I bumped it up all the way, it would look like sickening, but it's actually not so bad. It doesn't really abuse the saturation functions very much. I'm going to bump up the strength of the lighting effects that we're going to be working with. Detail contrast, we'll go back here. Now the lighting adjustments, the best way I can describe this to me, it's kind of like taking a shadowy cloud and blotching it around in different areas. And I'm going to click to around here. There's a checkbox here which takes us into a different style. And got these buttons here, natural plus, medium, surreal, surreal plus. I'm going to go back to natural because I actually kind of liked it when I first clicked on it. So I'm going to go before, after. I kind of like this natural look in the second setting. I see some haloing around the buildings I don't quite like. That might be from the strength, so I'm going to bring the strength back a bit. And I'm just going to tweak a few other things. I'm not giving you any particular reasons, but play with the software, see what you got. If you like it, save it as a preset. Call it Hazelton for me. Save. Process. So as this file finishes processing, we're going to see the final result pop up, and we're going to have to save it. Once we finish some of the finishing touches on this shot, we are going to File, Save As. I'm going to go back to the desktop, to the Hazelton output, Final Panoramic. Since we're done doing tone mapping, I'm going to save it straight away as an 8-bit file because I don't intend to do much with this other than post it online. Once it's been saved, I can close this, quit this. So now that we've saved it and closed the program, we're going to take our finished tone map TIFF, drag it down to Photoshop, and we're going to quickly crop into the areas where PT GUI left exposed some rough stuff. Enter. Now, if you lived on the 100-foot level floor of the Hazelton lofts, this would be your balcony view. That's the intent here, to represent